Praise be Jesus and Mary. We heard in the responsorial psalm, Lord, you will show us the path of life. And indeed, he has. In the gospel reading today, we heard about two disciples of our Lord who were engaged in a lively conversation about all the things that had taken place in Jerusalem a couple days earlier about the Passion and the death of our Lord, and even the report of his resurrection. But, we have to understand, and what's made perfectly clear is that they didn't believe. So, our Lord, who was with them, goes through all the scriptures, and he explains to them every single passage that referred to him in Moses and the prophets. And they admit, in their hearts that their hearts were burning within them, as he spoke. But still, they didn't believe. This is precisely the problem. They could look right at him and say, well, we were hoping that he was the one. He was a prophet, mighty in word and deed. And, our Lord looked at them and said, how slow of heart you are. Then, finally, they did recognize him in the breaking of the bread. And, we can't be too hard on these disciples, though. Our hearts are often slow to believe as well. Maybe not so much what the prophets have taught, but what the Son of God himself, has taught us. We live in a society today where we're taught that we can decide for ourselves. We can make our own choices. Heck, we can make our own rules, our own truth. We have all these religions and belief systems out there. The teachings of the church and the teachings of Jesus Christ, well, they're just one among many. Unfortunately, we think somehow that we can pick and choose what we want to believe, even if we do accept the truth. The real question is, how much of an effect does it have in our lives? The question each one of us needs to ask today is, if Jesus has revealed to us the path of life, how many of us recognize him? Not how many of us know what the church teaches. Not how many of us can talk about the Eucharist in eloquent and objective terms, but subjectively, in the depths of our hearts, how many of us recognize Jesus truly present in the Eucharist? To recognize him requires a relationship. It requires that we spend time with him. When two people love each other, they want to spend as much time as possible with each other. Talk, get to know one another. If we're going to say in our heads, I believe, that Jesus is there in the Eucharist, then the question is, what are we doing with that belief? If we know that He's God and He's right there, well, the obvious question is, why aren't we? Why is the TV more important than the tabernacle? Or who is in the tabernacle? Let's face it, most Catholics spend more time in front of the boob tube than they do in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. Now, if we know that God is right there, why don't we recognize Him? Why don't we act upon what we profess? Our hearts burn within us when we think about the reality. But then, like the two disciples who saw the events of Jerusalem and heard about the resurrection, we turn around and we walk away. They left Jerusalem and they walked down to Emmaus. They were hoping that He was the one, but their hearts were slow to believe. Our minds have accepted the truth, but our hearts are slow to believe. All we can do is take up the challenge to do exactly what one saint after another has asked each one of us to do, and that's to spend time with our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, to make changes in our lives. That's probably why most people avoid our Lord, because they'll have to change their lives drastically. People don't like change. People are comfortable with their mediocre spirituality. We don't want to have to do too much fasting or to mortify ourselves and do penance for the love of God and the salvation of souls like Jesus did. That's too great a price. So we keep our distance. But to truly recognize our Lord in the breaking of the bread, not just to have an objective knowledge and faith, but to have a subjective faith. To recognize Jesus truly present in the Eucharist, to believe in our hearts, not merely in our minds. If we recognize Him there, then we'll be there with Him. We're not going to be like the disciples on the road to Emmaus any longer, who walk away with the knowledge, but do not have belief in their hearts. When we recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread and come forward to receive Him into our hearts, when we recognize Him there, we'll come and we'll be with Him, and we'll enter into the depths of our slow and unbelieving hearts. And hopefully, we will live what we believe, because we know and have recognized Jesus Christ, true God and true man, present within us. And He will change our hearts. Like those two disciples, We'll stop wondering about aimlessly, knowing what the truth is, but not, letting it in, and we'll return, and so as to announce to others as they did, and to the whole world, and to live in our lives, that which we have recognized, Jesus Christ, truly present, in the breaking of the bread.